Hello and welcome back for another segment of our Civil War series. In this video, we will finally reach a breaking point for our country, see the election of a new president, and explore several important battles which took place here in Virginia. As you're watching, take some time to consider the following learning targets which are essential to this unit. I can describe the issue that divided Virginians and led to the creation of West Virginia. I can explain how the election of Abraham Lincoln impacted the start of the Civil War. And lastly, I can describe the major battles of the Civil War which took place in Virginia. So when we left off, the Dred Scott decision had angered much of the North. The Supreme Court, in what historians have called its worst decision, ruled that not only was Scott still the property of his masters, but he should never have been able to sue for his freedom in the first place because the U.S. Constitution only applied to white people. As a direct result, a new political party, the Republicans, vowed to prevent slavery from expanding into any new Western territories. Who was the head of their party, you may ask? None other than Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, a tall Midwestern man, grew up in Kentucky. Although he only attended school for 1 year, he loved reading and years later went to law school to become a lawyer in Springfield, Illinois. In 1858, in an attempt to help make changes that would improve our nation, he ran for a seat in Congress. Although he ultimately lost to Stephen A. Douglas, he became very well known across the country from a debate in which he called slavery evil. Just 2 short years later, having no real political experience, Lincoln was elected the 16th president of the United States, largely by those Northerners who'd been appalled at the state of the country. On the other hand, Southerners were very disappointed in the results of the election. Many feared that this new president would be the one to cause a legal end to slavery and upend their livelihood. From their perspective, the legality of slavery should never be a federal decision and should always remain the decision of individual states. With this idea, they framed their fight as one for states' rights and removing federal government oversight. So in December 1860, 1 month after Lincoln's election, South Carolina became the first to secede from the Union. This meant that they no longer recognized themselves as part of the U.S., and they formed their own country. Soon after, 6 other Deep South states joined, and they formed the Confederate States of America. Their capital was placed in Montgomery, Alabama, and Jefferson Davis was chosen to be their president. Jefferson Davis was a planter and politician from Mississippi. After graduating from the U.S. Military Academy and becoming a successful plantation owner, he decided to enter into politics. In 1845, he was elected to represent Mississippi in the U.S. House of Representatives before leaving to fight in the Mexican War from 1846 to 1848. Upon his return, he re-entered the political scene and was elected to the U.S. Senate, and later serving as the Secretary of War in President Franklin Pierce's cabinet. He believed that slavery should be legal in all U.S. territories. It was for these reasons that he was the perfect candidate to lead the Confederate States in their fight against the United States. The first moments of the Civil War would come on the morning of April 12, 1861, when Confederate soldiers attacked Fort Sumter, a federal fort in Charleston Harbor, just outside of South Carolina's largest city. After the secession of the Southern states, this fort became a central point for both the Union and the Confederacy. President Lincoln ordered the fort to be resupplied for the Union soldiers, and the Confederacy chose to fire on the fort rather than allowing it to be restocked. Ultimately, the Union surrendered this battle to the Confederate soldiers and lost control of Fort Sumter. As a result of the first acts of war on the part of the Confederacy, President Lincoln ordered all states that had not seceded to send volunteer soldiers to Fort Sumter to put down the rebellion by force. Going back to a few months before Fort Sumter, Virginia delegates had gathered to determine whether they would secede and join other Southern states in the Confederacy or remain in the Union and loyal to President Lincoln. In that vote, it was 2-1 in favor of remaining in the Union. Leaving the U.S. meant losing its protection, and they weren't ready for that. Then, news spread of Fort Sumter, including Lincoln's order for the use of force to stop the rebellion. They came together again for another vote, and this time the vote was 2-1 in favor of seceding. So on April 17th, Virginia seceded, soon joined by North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas. This made 11 states in all, forming the Confederacy. It is worth noting that 4 slave states, Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, remained in the Union. So this war wasn't perfectly between slave states and free states. The decision to secede wasn't popular all across Virginia, though. Remember those western counties who proposed a 30-year plan to phase out slavery? They were far less reliant on slavery than those in the eastern part of the state. They had also been at odds with eastern counties over other issues like voting rights for all white men, not just those who were wealthy and owned land. At this breaking point, the western counties chose to secede as well, but they were seceding from Virginia and were finally recognized as the Union state of West Virginia in 1863. Gaining Virginia was a huge win for the Confederacy. It was the largest and wealthiest state in the South. And in cities like Richmond, there were factories in which guns and other war materials could be produced. Virginia was also home to some of the greatest military minds in the country. In fact, the state was so important to the Confederacy that the capital was moved from Montgomery, Alabama to Richmond, Virginia, which was only a short distance from the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. So here we are at the start of the war. On July 21st, 1861, mere months after Fort Sumter, the first major land battle of the Civil War took place right here in Manassas, Virginia. Over 60,000 soldiers fought in this single-day battle, and nearly 5,000 would die by the end of the day. Initially, it looked as if this would be an easy win for the North, but when more Confederate soldiers kept arriving from the West, it became an astonishing Confederate victory, and the Union soldiers retreated. Another important battle, which took place in Fredericksburg, Virginia on December 13, 1862, was the Battle of Fredericksburg. This particular battle was important because it was one of the Union's worst defeats in the entire war. The Union Army suffered huge casualties, and this battle gave the Confederacy hope that they could win the war. Lastly, we need to look at a battle which would change how armies fought on the water forever. The Battle of Hampton Roads, also known as the Battle of the Ironclads, took place over 2 days from March 8th to the 9th, 1862. It was the first sea battle of the Civil War, but that's not what made it unique. It was the first time ships made of iron were used in battle. Prior to this, ships were largely wooden and a lot easier to destroy. The Monitor, a ship from the north, and the Merrimac from the south fought over a Union blockade, preventing supplies from reaching the South. This battle ended in a draw because neither side could destroy their enemy's ships. In the next and final video of this series, we will be learning about the major contributors to the Civil War, as well as how the war ultimately came to an end. Take a moment before you leave to reflect on the following questions. What issue divided the eastern-western counties of Virginia? How did Lincoln's election indirectly lead to the start of the Civil War? And what were 3 major battles that took place in Virginia?